Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Hey y'all, this is Ash from Creepy Tapas Podcast. There are a few places selling stickers these days, but I found a small business on Etsy called Snarky Sticker Lady, and I am in love with her stuff. We all love snark around here on the Darkcast Network. When I looked at the shop, I was surprised because she has some really funny stickers. The owner, Allison, knows that pride is not a sin, and she designed a line of stickers for friends of the LGBTQIA community. Allison has said of her own business, I love stickers. I love making stickers. I love putting stickers on everything. I started making stickers because I wanted some snarky, smart-ass stickers, and nobody had them. I need my sarcastic flag to fly, honey. So after making some snarky stickers, I started making lots of other types of stickers too. As a loyal friend to the LGBTQIA community, I wanted some stickers to show how I feel, so I made them. Ha! Maybe you'd like to show how you feel too. All sticker designs are welcome in my shop. Just send your ideas in. All of Allison's stickers are vinyl and laminated, so they are water resistant and will last a really long time. Check her out on Etsy at etsy.com/shop Snarky Sticker Lady. Hey, ba-da-boop boo, I wanna get snarky with you, Snarky Sticker Lady on Etsy.
Are you into the spooky and macabre?
Is your inner witch dying to learn more about what makes the world magical?
Do you occasionally crave nerdy horror content from film and RPGs?
Well, have we got a podcast just for you.
Join the squad at Mission Spooky where Kiki,
JC,
And Cord
research some of the scariest historical places from Pennsylvania.
listen to our ghost stories and legends.
Learn as we delve into the world of history, magic, and folklore.
and be entertained with our D&D 5e RPG segment, Cordverse Cryptid.
Find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and follow us on Spotify, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
And remember, stay spooky.
And don't die.
But if you do, contact us.
Heya! If this is your first time listening, make no mistake, this is a true crime podcast about murder, crime, and the LGBTQ community. Oh, and I have a potty mouth at times. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors! Welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. Find me on the socials as Rainbow Crimes, Beyond the Rainbow, and Darkcast Network. Consider joining my Patreon. At the unicorn level, you'll get ad-free early release episodes and one extra episode a month that I haven't told here yet on the regular show. They're called Patreon exclusive episodes, and I'll leave a link in the show notes. It's Women's Herstory Month, so plan on a full month of stories about women. Plus, I have 2 collaborations I'm working on for this month. One with Ashley of Fuck That Podcast, and one with Ash and Jordan, hosts of Creepy Tapas. I've been doing this show for quite a while now. Back in May of 2020, nearly 3 years ago, gosh, it doesn't seem that long, I covered several cases of women pretending to be men to get together with other women. The cases were that of Gail Newland, Jennifer Staines, and Patricia Dye. This episode, I have more cases, and I've been wanting to cover them for a while. Just so you know, I do not condone pulling the wool over anyone's eyes and outright lying to them just to get into their goodies. Some of the people in this episode that I'm going to discuss may be trans men and not able to help their actions, other than the lying, of course. But some of them aren't. Gender fraud is one thing, but trying to live your life comfortably and not in pain or anguish is quite another. And this will bring me into a little rant about trans folk. I'm thoroughly ashamed of how our government continues to create these insane anti-trans laws. This is especially apparent with the Republican Party, and all of these new anti-trans laws that they're trying to pass. First, the government takes away a woman's right to an abortion, something to do with her own body. And now they're trying to take away any rights the trans community has. They want to abolish trans people. And for what? Mostly because their religion interprets their fictitious book saying being trans, hell, being LGBTQ is wrong. Well, guess what? Their interpretations are wrong, and not one bit godly. God is supposed to love all of his children, if that is, you believe in God. Trans folk and members of the LGBTQ are God's children. Again, if you're atheist or agnostic, you're probably rolling your eyes at my rant. And it's okay. The point I'm trying to make is religion and government do not mix. They have no business mixing, ever. Politicians need to steer clear of their personal biases and steer clear of what's in our fucking pants. It's not their business. Whom we choose to love, what our preferred gender or sexuality is, it has nothing to do with them. So they need to just fuck off. I can't be any clearer than that. In my research, I thought I found an article explaining trans folk might be victims of their own genetics. It had to do with a lot of chromosome talk and XX, XY, XYZ, and to be honest, it all started to look like I was back in freaking algebra again. It scared me. But my friend Jackie, who's host of Cause of Death podcast and is Darkcast Network's resident scientist expert, she explained it to me differently. Now remember, Jackie's a scientist. She speaks in facts and doesn't sugarcoat it. In this instance, she'll be telling us about the process a trans woman may go through. Just know this would be the same for female to male also, which is what our topic in this episode is about. Now here's Jackie with information that made so much more sense to me than the algebra code.
Hello, I'm Jackie Moranti, and I host a podcast called Cause of Death 100 Seconds to Midnight. CJ asked me to talk to you about an article that she had read on transgenderism, and so I'm here to explain what the article said and how much of it is actually true. I'd like to begin by talking about neuropathy in this blog. Mr. Kennan does a fairly good job of explaining what that looks like and the way it works. He is correct when he says that transgenderism goes beyond the biological sex. Whether a person was born XX or XY has very little to do with transgender behavior. There is a distinct difference between gender and biological sex. Biological sex is the pair of genes that make up one's physical gender assignment, particularly the reproductive system, while gender is more of a neuropathic and psychopathic way that one sees themselves. I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with this. I'm a microbiologist. I have a very basic understanding of genetics. I do have some background in neuropathy, but I have very limited background in psychological science. Keeping that in mind, I'm going to attempt to explain how the neuropathy works without going too far into the psychological aspects of transgenderism. People can be born into the wrong body. Their natural gender assignment may be male, but their body will act distinctly female. In this case, their body will produce more estrogen than testosterone. Their body will have more female development. They'll produce more cortisol and less melatonin, even though their gender assignment is male. The neural pathways will give them more female than male features. They'll act more like females, and they'll think more like females. In this case, they will always feel that there's something wrong with their body. They won't feel comfortable in their own skin because their reproductive organs aren't where or what they're supposed to be. This will cause devastating psychological conflicts that we call gender dysphoria. This can cause severe mental illness that can spiral this person into deep bouts of depression or other mental illness. These people will never be happy without a gender reassignment. Now, this is not a decision that one makes lightly. This is a permanent and very painful decision. One doesn't just wake up on Tuesday and say, I think I'll go change my sex, do some retail therapy, and meet my friends for lunch. Gender reassignment can take up to a year. It requires several surgeries and a lifetime of hormonal therapy to be successful. After reassignment is complete, these people will suffer a lifetime of criticism and bullying. The chances that they will meet with violence increase 75%. I only say that to impress upon all of you that this is a very hard decision, so we don't want to go down the path of it's all in their head. Yes, psychology has something to do with it, but the problems that these people suffer go way beyond gender assignment or psychology. Their neural pathways are giving their bodies signals that don't match the biological sex that they were assigned at birth. Now, where Mr. Kennan was a bit confused was that he said there were at least 6 biological sexes. This is untrue. There are only 2, male and female. A chromosome is made of several proteins and DNA that are organized into gene structures. Each human cell normally contains 23 pairs of chromosomes. The 23rd chromosome is the sex chromosome, which is responsible for assigning natural sex to a child. If there are more than 3 pairs of chromosomes that come together, this is called a trisomy. It's not a biological sex, it's an anomaly. Trisomies cause several health problems. For instance, if there is a trisomy on chromosome number 13, the child will be born with Down syndrome. Down syndrome causes more than learning or cognitive disabilities. It causes organ dysfunction and loss of motor control. Many people with Down syndrome can't survive without extensive medical intervention, and most will never live lives where they are not under the care of another. When a trisomy occurs in the 23rd chromosome, the person may outwardly lead a normal life. But for most of these people, their reproductive organs won't function normally. The effects may be limited to not only not being able to bear children, but in some cases, a male may have a period every month. With nowhere for that blood to go, it will be absorbed back into the body where sepsis can occur. These are very serious anomalies and shouldn't be taken lightly. Can they be a part of transgenderism? Absolutely. But these occurrences are very, very rare, thank God. CJ and I had a chat a while ago on the cause of transgenderism. I explained all of this very poorly, so I hope I'm doing a much better job of it now. It's a very complicated issue, not one that only points to one part of the human anatomy or physiology. Several factors can be involved. Genetics does have a lot to do with it, but it goes way beyond the biological sex assignment and the XY or XX chromosomes. Remember, they are all a mass of genetic material that makes up our entire being. So our neurological system is as much controlled by our genetics as our biological sex. While Mr. Kennan makes some very good points, and he explains the neuropathy of transgenderism very well, he's not a scientist or a geneticist. He's a blogger. I don't know what his background is, but he's a guy who's trying to make sense of a very complicated subject, and we have to give him a lot of credit for at least trying. Okay, CJ, I hope I did well with that. And back to you at Seabreeze Studios.
Thanks, Jackie, for clearing that up. I'll include the article I referred to Jackie in the show notes, so you can look it over and see if it makes sense to you. Now, warriors, you might be asking, what has this to do with the cases I'm going to be presenting to you today? That's a fair question. I told you I was revisiting the She's the Man theme with new cases. As we've learned, oftentimes trans women will be murdered for not disclosing that they're a trans woman. Usually the killer is a cisgendered, straightish man. For example, the cases of Gwen Arahu, Angie Zapata, and Nikki Kuhnhausen. They were all trans women who were brutally murdered for non-disclosure of the gender they were assigned at birth. Not to victim blame, but the act of not telling someone you were about to get intimate with that you're trans is technically called gender fraud, which is a crime that's punishable by incarceration in most places. Unfortunately, sometimes even full disclosure that they're trans to the wrong person might still end up tragically. It's almost a damned if they do, damned if they don't kind of thing, which just adds another factor against trans folk. In the UK, 21-year-old Kyron Lee struck up a conversation on Facebook with a 23-year-old woman. Her name was Carol, and this was during the summer of 2011. Kyron's Facebook account was that of a fictitious man named Joey Crislow. Carol was immediately attracted to the picture of Joey. The picture of Joey showed a tall, buff-looking guy. Carol assumed he must be an Australian surfer with his sun-kissed skin and chiseled good looks. The two started out with private messaging, but then they exchanged numbers so texting and phone calls were the next steps. Sometimes they were on the phone so long with each other that they'd fall asleep. The getting to know you phase with messages, text, and phone calls, this went on for a year. Nudie photos were even exchanged. While all this was happening, Carol was 3 months pregnant, but her baby daddy, who she had been with for 4 years, he just walked out of Carol's life and that of the baby growing inside her. Kyron, as Joey, said he too had a child, and he shared a photo of his child. And then he followed that up with the baby mama wouldn't allow Joey to see the daughter that they supposedly shared. I say supposedly because Kyron kind of lies a lot. Kyron reminds me of the catfish I had for 2 years. Both have very creative imaginations and are convincing storytellers. Carol really wanted to meet Joey, and Kyron fought this meeting every single time. Kyron finally planned a date with Carol, and then Carol received a text from a number she didn't recognize. The text said that Joey was in an accident and was in intensive care at the hospital. When Carol called the hospital where Joey apparently was, no one at the hospital had ever heard of a patient called Joey Crislow. Kyron avoided meeting up with Carol a few more times until Carol finally put her foot down, and she told him being Joey, "You have until this weekend to come see me at my mother's home, and if you don't, I'm done doing this with you." Kyron was stuck. Either go see Carol as themselves or lose the relationship they put so much energy into building. In October 2012, Kyron pulled up to Carol's mom's house. Carol immediately saw why Joey, in air quotes, had been hiding. Joey looked nothing like his surfer god pictures on Facebook. The man behind the wheel was chubby and wore a puffy jacket to conceal his weight. He had a baby face and was wearing a floppy hat to hide some of his features. Disappointed, Carol got into the passenger side of Kyron's car. Kyron wouldn't even look Carol in the eyes. Then, in a panic, or maybe it was strong survival intuition, Carol jumped out of the car and ran back into her mother's house. It had been 2 weeks, and Carol wouldn't respond to any of Kyron's texts or phone calls. After the 2 weeks, she finally decided to allow Kyron to explain himself. Kyron told her he used the Joey account on Facebook because he was trying to catch a girl cheating on her boyfriend. The boyfriend was Kyron's buddy. Kyron was afraid if he showed Carol a true picture of himself, she wouldn't be interested. I'm not sure if any of you have ever been catfished, but it's incredibly easy to fall for people you've had a connection with. Someone you communicate with every day, whether by phone or text, especially after having done it a year, let alone 2 years. If you open your heart to that person, thinking you know what they look like, thinking you know who they are, You've had romantic conversations. It's even possible to fall in love with that person. And you know, when you do fall in love with someone, you do almost anything for them. Carol decided to give Kyron another chance, and she forgave him. She decided she was being shallow. After all, Kyron wasn't ugly. He just wasn't her normal type of guy that she'd go for. The next 2 weeks of their relationship got pretty intense between the couple. Carol said she felt like she'd known Kyron her whole life by now. She was positive that there were no more secrets between them and everything was out in the open. She was happy in their relationship, and she wanted to take things to the next level. Kyron would make up excuses for not having sex with Carol. He said he found a lump on his penis, but after Carol's continued encouragement, Kyron finally gave in. The couple had sex once. Kyron kept his clothes on and would push Carol's hand away if she tried to grope him. The whole act of lovemaking was quick and awkward, but it was consensual by both parties. Carol just figured Kyron was nervous, and that's why it was so awkward. About a week after their terrible sex, Carol's mother went through a McDonald's restaurant drive-thru. And guess who was working? Kyron. Kyron had once told Carol he worked miles away doing something much different than McDonald's drive-thru. So Carol's mom phoned Carol and told her about Kyron. Enraged, Carol soon showed up at the McDonald's. Kyron saw her and he jetted out the back of the fast food restaurant. Carol spoke to the manager about their employee, Kyron Lee, who had just ran out. The manager looked bewildered and said, "That isn't Kyron. That's Fiona Manson, and she's not a man. She's a lesbian." Can you just imagine the wave of emotion searing through Carol at that moment? I would have been devastated and felt so freaking stupid. Not because Kyron was a woman, but because Kyron continued the deception of who he was. Thoroughly upset, Carol went to her local police department and she filed a formal complaint against Kyron. Unbeknownst to Carol and Kyron's McDonald's manager, Kyron was midway through transitioning to be male. He had already had top surgery, and he was anxiously awaiting his bottom surgery. He was also waiting to come clean to Carol about who he was until New Year's. Christmas was coming, and he knew how excited Carol was for the holidays. He didn't want to ruin it by exposing more lies. By now, Carol was no longer having anything to do with Kyron. That is, until he showed up at her mom's house in January 2013. Kyron held a knife and he promised to kill himself if Carol wouldn't talk to him. Months later, the prosecutor's office issued a warrant for Kyron's arrest. The charge was assault by penetration on Carol. Kyron was scared and stunned. He was scared if he ended up in prison, would it be a men's prison or a woman's prison? He didn't like the prospect of either. He was stunned because the sex was consensual between two adults. Assault by penetration was only one step down from rape. What Kyron didn't realize was that he was culpable of gender fraud as well. At his trial, Kyron said, "Assault by penetration? It makes it sound like I pinned Carol down and did some type of horror to her." His defense told him the prosecution had an airtight case against him, so Kyron pleaded guilty. And you know, had Kyron been born with a real flush dick, none of this would have most likely happened. But since he wasn't, he suffered from gender dysphoria and all of the discomforts that come along with it until he realized he could do something about it by transitioning. Should he have been honest about who he was from the beginning with Carol? Well, of course. A relationship based on lies is not a good foundation for everlasting love. Kyron received a 2-year suspended sentence for sexual assault by penetration based on gender fraud. Carol, who was trying to remain anonymous other than going by Carol, was livid over the suspended sentence. She gave up trying to hide her name and face. She decided to go public with what Kyron did to her. And I'm not sure if it did any good, but now the public knows all the dirty laundry, and Kyron still did not have to serve jail or prison time. I kind of feel bad for both parties involved. A little more so for Carol, because nobody likes to be lied to. Except for Rihanna, because apparently she loves the way you lie. Oh my God, I believe all of the cases I have for you this episode are from the UK, oddly enough. This next case, I kind of think the perpetrator could be trans, or suffering from gender dysphoria for sure, but there was no mention of this person actually claiming they were. I also feel that there's something more psychologically up with this person than gender dysphoria. In 2007, when Samantha Brooks was 22, she was accused and found guilty of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl. And that's while she pretended to be a man. 14-year-old girl and Samantha Brooks is a grown-ass woman, pretending to be a grown-ass man. That's why I think there's something else mentally wrong with Samantha besides dysphoria. She did have to serve 18 months in jail for this offense, and she was supposed to report as a sex offender when she was released. But let's go back a little to 2001. Samantha was 16. She made contact, online I'm presuming, with a 14-year-old girl named Nicole. They talked and stuff, but it was pretty much stopped there until 2006, when Nicole was 19. She had just given birth to a baby 18 months prior, but she wasn't with the baby daddy. Samantha met Nicole finally in 2006, though Samantha claimed her name was Lee. And that's what I'll refer to Samantha as for the duration of this story, and I'll use he, him, his pronouns. Lee, another unisex name, presented masculine, so Nicole was sure he was a guy. In fact, I don't think Nicole ever questioned Lee's gender on her own. Lee and Nicole began a long-distance relationship, and they would spend time with each other on weekends. On weekends is when the two would be intimate with each other. Here's something really peculiar, though. During sex, Lee would use a wooden toilet paper holder as his penis, and I believe that gives new meaning to poppin' a woody. Lee and Nicole broke up in 2007. Then Lee was arrested and convicted for child sexual abuse of the 14-year-old girl. While in prison for that offense, Lee would write Nicole and tell her that he was incarcerated for beating up a pedophile. Oh, Lee, the lies just ooze from your lips, don't they? After serving 18 months, Lee was out of jail and back in contact with Nicole. But Lee did not register as a sex offender and had a warrant issued for his arrest. Happy-go-lucky Lee went and visited Nicole. They started to see each other again. Lee proposed marriage to Nicole. The wedding was set to take place in 2010. But Nicole's family was wary of Lee. He had no facial hair or Adam's apple. Their suspicions were the only time Nicole ever doubted Lee wasn't who he claimed to be. She had sex with Lee off and on during the years, but never believed Lee was a woman. Although she did get an intuition that something was off about Lee. She just couldn't figure out what it was. In 2011, Lee was arrested for not registering as a sex offender, and Nicole was shocked to discover Lee was a woman and not a man. Charges of gender fraud were also tacked on to Lee's arrest warrant. As quickly as they were added, those charges were dropped and Lee remains free today. He only had to register as a sex offender for 10 years before he could live his life untethered in 2021. I'm going to end this episode with one more case. I actually have 4 more, but I think I'm going to do a She's the Man 3 sometime in the near future. So this last case, I'm on the fence about if I think the perpetrator is trans or not. I personally don't think she is. I think she's a lesbian. And as I mentioned earlier, how we do almost anything for the person we love, I think it's possible she might have gotten the transitional surgery just to become a trans man if the girl she seduced would have stayed with her. But other than that, I saw no signs of gender dysphoria in this young girl I'm about to tell you about. In 2012, then 17-year-old Justine McNally, she lured a 16-year-old girl into having sex with her 3 times, believing Justine was her boyfriend named Scott. I'll refer to Justine as Scott just to save the confusion. The relationship started, as many of them do, as an online romance. At that time, Scott was 13 and the victim was 12. The online chat room, I believe, was a gamer's chat, but Scott's gamer mode expanded way past video games. Through the years, the two continued their online romance. And truthfully, that just feels kind of wrong saying romance with a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old. They were children! But still, the relationship grew, and it continued to grow until the two actually met when Scott was 17 and the victim was 16. Scott presented as a goth teenage boy, and the victim was none the wiser. Conversations before their meeting were sexy and filled with talk about what Scott would do with his dick when they met. The couple were together long distance for 3.5 years before meeting. Scott, Justine, even had a girlfriend that she had broken up with before meeting the victim. In 2011, Scott arranged to stay with a friend of her family's in England. This is near where the victim lived. Scott was from Scotland. Hey, Scott from Scotland! How quaint! After their first meeting, they consummated their love. Scott wore a strap-on, and the girl believed Scott had taken her virginity in a dark bedroom at Scott's family friend's home. 2 more times the two would have sex. The girl told Scott she'd give him a blowjob, but Scott told her no, he was happy just pleasuring her. Wait, straight ladies listening, does this ever happen? Do guys really turn down a blowy? I'm curious, let me know, 'cause that just doesn't sound right. Scott's cover was nearly blown when her ex in Scotland contacted the victim in London and told her that Scott's a girl. But Scott was able to quickly dismiss it as a scorned ex who was bitterly trying to get revenge on him. After the 3 sexual encounters with the victim, Scott's family friend that Justine, was staying with heard Scott talking on the phone. Some of the dialogue didn't make sense, so the family friend went through Scott's backpack and found the strap-on. As a side, I don't care I'm a guest in your house. That does not give you a right to go through my shit. But anyway, Scott told the friend of the family he was planning on having gender-affirming surgery so he could continue his relationship with the victim. But the family friend, the woman, she clenched her pearls and gasped. This was disgusting. And she outed Scott to the victim and her family as Justine McNally. The victim and her family filed a criminal report against Justine, aka Scott. Justine was arrested and put on trial charged with gender fraud and 6 counts of sexual assault by penetration. Why 6? They were together 3 times unless they did it twice each time? I don't know. Justine was sentenced to 3 years in prison for her actions. The victim has suffered from trauma and deep trust issues. Justine would spend at least half of that sentence behind bars before being considered for parole. And warriors, that wraps up the cases of this episode. What do you feel about all this? I think what bothers me the most about cases like this is when the victim is under 18. Even if the assailant is close in age, there's still something about it where they're just children. I also don't like the lies and intentional misrepresentations of people. Be you. Be honest. Tell me your thoughts on the topic on the socials. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Happy Women's Herstory Month, everyone. Love ya. You matter. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay, trans, bi, or to live your truth, unless you're a murderer. Now somebody please dip me in honey and throw me to the lesbians.